In order to develop your rough draft for your research paper, the very first thing that you're going to need to do is to look at the outline that you've developed. The outline is going to map out the order that your paper needs to be in. The rough draft of your paper is going to need to be between 1,500 and 1,700 words total, and this includes introduction through conclusion all the way down to the works cited page, which will actually be part of this document. If by chance you have two sources with the authors who have the same last name, or you have two sources with the same article title, I provided a link for you here that's going to show you the way that you will divide this out whenever you're writing your paper so that you don't overlap, and the person who is reading it will be able to tell specifically which source it is that you're referring to. Now, if you do not have sources with the same names or same article titles, then you don't need to worry about this handout, but this will only apply to you if, for instance, you have two authors whose last names are Smith, or you have two authors or two article titles that have the same exact name, and this will actually show you the way that you'll divide this up within your paper. Now, when you took those quizzes back in weeks 1 and 2, it showed you the way to specifically go through and actually cite information within your paper. And whenever you're pulling information from your annotated bibliographies, because all throughout the body of your paper you're going to have to cite information to show where your information came from, because even though you are arguing your side of the issue, you're arguing your side of the issue by using support from other sources. Now, when you go through and do this and you actually include that information from those annotations that you've had, and you want to actually say that the authors are pointing out the information within the context of your paper, typically we fall into a pitfall of wanting to try to use says or states all the time, to where you say that Johnson says this happens, or Blackledge says this happens. Jackson states this happens. And so what I've done here is I provided you with a list of verbs that you can use instead of using says or states, and I want you to be sure to make a note of the fact that I do not want you to use says or states anywhere within this paper. Keep in mind that this paper has to be written in third person, as we've mentioned throughout the process here, third person only with no contractions. Now, I have provided you an example of a research paper here, and we're going to kind of talk through this step by step so that you can see the way that the paper is going to be set up. The first thing I want you to do in looking at the rough draft that is listed for you here, and of course this is a final copy that I'm using as a rough draft as we develop this, because your rough draft will be actually a completed copy of your paper that you submit that I'll provide feedback to you for. You'll notice here at the top that you have your name, the class, my name, and then the date that the paper is going to be due, and everything is going to be double spaced, which means that there's one blank line between each line of type. Whenever you look at the spacing here, you're going to notice that that follows through here, all the way through the title, all the way through the paper. If you scroll all the way to the end, you're going to notice that the spacing is the same, even when you get to the works cited page. And of course, the works cited page that you will submit to me is going to be attached to the end of the paper. If your paper ends on page 8, the works cited page will be page 9. The title up here is centered, and of course you're going to use hanging indent all the way throughout as you alphabetize your information and list all of your sources. Now, in developing the rough draft, you're going to notice here, of course, that you're going to have a title, and I would like for your title to have this colon in it, as was mentioned in the Research Notes PowerPoint that I provided for you early on, to show you some example ways to set up your title. Keep in mind that you're going to have your overall topic for your paper, and then of course after the colon you're going to have the focus of what your paper is going to be on here. The introduction is going to provide some background information for your topic. The introduction will not have anything cited within it because all of this needs to be your own information presented from a third person perspective. The introduction is going to be all the background information that leads into your paper, but at the very end of the introduction you're going to have a thesis statement, and that thesis statement needs to be underlined, and it needs to match the thesis statement that you submitted to me at the beginning of the trimester. This is going to tell which side of the issue that you're on, and so this is going to be the argumentative statement of your paper. You'll notice here as we scan down through the paper that in some parts you see that there's going to be some italicized sentences at the very beginning. There was an italicized sentence, and right here is going to be an italicized sentence. What this is going to be where the sections of the paper starting with Roman numeral 2, Roman numeral 3, and Roman numeral 4. Whenever you begin a Roman numeral section, your topic sentence is going to need to be italicized to show that that's where that section actually begins. Now keep in mind that you're following the order of the outline. The order of the outline is going to state the order of the paper, but your paper may not have one individual paragraph per point that's on the outline. You follow the order and keep in mind that your paragraphs need to be between 5 sentences as a minimum and 12 sentences as a maximum. Each one of the body paragraphs can be no longer than 12 sentences, and each body paragraph has to be at least a minimum of 5 sentences. Now, each body paragraph, whenever you look at each one of these, I want you to note that you must have an original sentence at the beginning of the body of the paragraph, and that means it has to be your own sentence. It cannot be something that is cited. There needs to be an original sentence somewhere in the middle of the paragraph, and then there needs to be an original sentence at the end of the paragraph, so that every single body paragraph is going to have 3 original sentences. An original sentence at the beginning, an original sentence in the middle, and an original sentence at the end. You can have more than 3 original sentences, but that needs to be the minimum that you have within each body paragraph. You'll notice original sentence here, you'll notice original sentence here, and then you'll notice an original sentence here. So every body paragraph is going to have 3 original sentences. You can have more than the 3 that are given, but every one must have a minimum of 3 original sentences. Now, throughout your paragraphs, what you're going to do is you're going to cite information that comes from your annotations and cite information that comes from your sources. You'll notice here that this information that is listed here provides the names of the people that come specifically from the Works Cited page. And of course, these are listed here, Alan Prandini and Wagner, and then the page number is going to be listed here at the very end. So within your paper, when you go in and actually cite the source, you're going to notice that you have the 2 authors' last names at the end of the sentence, and then you have a page number. And so each one of the times that the sources are cited within the paragraph, you'll notice here they're at the end in the parentheses, and here they're at the beginning with just the page number at the end. MLA provides you with 2 options. You can either write the sentence out using your paraphrased information, which means that it needs to be in your own words, and at the end put the parentheses with the author's names and the page number. Notice that the period comes behind the parentheses, so you see this here and you see this here, or you can actually put the author's names at the beginning of the sentence and the page number at the end. If the names are not in the sentence, you have to have name and page number at the end in order to show that this actually comes from a source for each sentence that you pull or piece of information that you pull from an outside source. If the names are not in the sentence, the names have to come at the beginning of the sentence, and there has to be a page number at the end. So that any sentence that is pulled from a source, any sentence information that is pulled from a source that's paraphrased, it has to be cited in order to avoid plagiarism. And you'll see here in this particular paragraph, the person used the same source throughout, but the person did not have any more than 3 sentences from the same source back to back. If you do use your same sources back to back, you have to break that up with an original sentence. You cannot have 5 Alan Prandini and Wagners all together. You would at least need to put an original sentence behind the 3rd one. You'll see here that this person actually used a little bit more variety within this body paragraph, to where the person has Kalengart, the person has Fish, Alan Prandini and Wagner, Alan Prandini and Wagner, and then Fish. And ideally, you would like paragraphs set up in this particular way so that you wouldn't be running into the possibility of the fact that you're having the same source all the way throughout, because you don't want the paragraphs to be all nothing more than just your annotations. You want to use the paragraphs to build what it is that you're arguing. Now, notice here that the person actually went through and bold-faced this information, and of course this information that is listed here is going to be a direct quote. If you have any direct quotes within your paper, I want you to bold-face the information as you put it inside your draft. And of course this entire sentence is bold-faced, and you'll notice here that this person has a name here at the very beginning, but at the end it has quoted in Pearson 6. Now if you look at Dalzell and you go down here to the Works Cited page, you'll notice that there is no Dalzell on the Works Cited page. But if you come up here and you look at the information, we'll see here that the person includes Pearson, and Pearson is the actual author of the article, and that name is going to appear on the Works Cited page. So whenever you're looking at your source material, if by chance you use a name other than the name of the author that's on the Works Cited page, you're going to need to use this format, this QTD, to tell me that you've quoted this particular person from this particular source. And the directions in the MLA version of the anthology kind of goes through and shows you specifically how to do this. Now you'll notice here in this particular paragraph that the author kind of made a mistake. As we've mentioned that there has to be three original sentences, there's one here and there's one here, but in this particular paragraph there was no original sentence in the middle. The person used a variety of sources because it had the Alan-Prandini and Wagner and Pearson here, but the individual did not use an original sentence in the middle. So every body paragraph has to have an original sentence at the beginning, one in the middle, and one in the end, and ideally you'd like to have a blend of sources and information throughout your paragraph to show that you're actually pulling from a variety of sources. Keep in mind that if you have the same source within a paragraph or you're using the same source back to back, you should not have any more than 3 sentences from the same source back to back. Now you'll notice here at the very end that the person, as a check, went through and actually identified one example of each time the source was used. Alan-Prandini and Wagner, we know, was used early on in the paper, and the person went through and highlighted Alan-Prandini and Wagner to show that that source was used. The second source on the Works Cited is Kallengardt, and you'll notice here the person highlighted Kallengardt. Please note that the page numbers that are listed here match up to the page numbers that are on the Works Cited page. Kallengardt 63. Then of course here you have Chen, and if you go through the paper and you look, the person actually highlights and identifies one time that the author Chen was used. Right here. So as a check, you want to go through whenever you're finished with your draft, find one example of each one of these sources and highlight it within the paper. Find another example of this, find an example of this source and highlight it within the paper before you submit your rough draft. Now keep in mind when you're looking at this Works Cited page here, this Works Cited page shows the old MLA. Of course we're using the new MLA, so when you use the Cite button, it's going to actually give you the URL that's going to be listed here at the end. Be sure that you're using that URL, and on your final copies be sure that you're actually italicizing the names of the source and the names of the database. As always, if you have any questions, please be sure that you actually reach out and contact me via Canvas inbox before the given deadline. It's going to take a little time to work on this draft, so be sure that you study the example paper that I've given you and spend the time that is necessary in order to develop the draft, and I'll be able to provide you feedback with what needs to be corrected before we submit the final copy.